Hi, my name is Melanie Kit. For my Capstone project, I analyzed a dataset containing global pharmaceutical drug spending and related economic metrics, such as total health expenditure and gross domestic product (GDP). This pharmaceutical or spending dataset comes from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This is based on the sales of prescription medications and over-the-counter products. So this project lies at the intersection of the healthcare and business industries. The main objective of the project is to identify expanding markets as a tool to help pharmaceutical companies adjust their production and logistics. The dataset includes the country code, year, calculated spending as percentage of total health spending, calculated medication spending as percentage of gross domestic product (GDP). So GDP, USD per capita, and total spend are indicators of a country's economic health and growth. Some data cleaning steps were completed, such as checking for missing values and formatting data properly. Pandas library was primarily used for these steps. For visualization, simple plots were displayed using matplotlib, while dynamic plots were made using Bokeh and Plotly. Finally, the clustering analysis was performed using scikit-learn, toolkit, k-means clustering, and including an initial data standardization with standard scalar. One major challenge with the dataset was that countries did not all have the same time range. Here, the first year, last year, and year count were determined and plotted. Some of the countries had limited data available, and in the end, the 2010 to 2020 year range was chosen so as to maximize the number of countries kept for subsequent analysis. With this 2010 to 2020 data subset, the yearly trends were then analyzed. To improve clarity, the plots only included the top 10 pharmaceutical spenders. To obtain this data subset, the data frame was grouped by location first, and the average calculated for the pharmaceutical spending as percentage of GDP as shown here. Also included are the details for a function to plot the yearly trends using Bokeh, and an example of the plot is shown here. Using Bokeh's interactive features, I highlighted the data point for Greece in 2020, which shows a steep increase from 2019. This can be explained by policy changes targeting the pharmaceutical industry, which increased spending. Other contributing factors are an aging population and the emergence of new and costly therapies. To capture the dynamic changes happening during the last decade, the growth rates for spending as percent of health expenses and GDP were also calculated as shown here. Here, Japan is highlighted as a country with a sharp decline in growth rate from 2019 to 2020. Again, policy changes, such as encouraging the use of generic drugs, reduce spending in this case. Finally, the growth rates calculated previously were used as features for a k-means clustering analysis. For k-means clustering, features were first picked, followed by feature standardization. Then, fitting the k-means model resulted in the cluster information. To answer our key question about emerging markets, 3 clusters were defined as stagnant, stable, and expanding markets. Clustering results were plotted, showing 3 centroids denoted with X and the data point clusters associated with each centroid. So, stagnant, stable, and expanding markets were labeled in blue, yellow, and green respectively. Examples from each market type are displayed using Bokeh. For global analysis using Plotly, the cluster results were visualized on a world map using the code shown here. Looking at distinct regions, both North America, Asia, and Oceania include stagnant and stable markets, while Europe includes some emerging markets. Analyzing yearly spending showed variations that were explained by different factors, such as policy changes and new and more expensive medication being on the market. The key objective was achieved with the identification of 5 countries to target as emerging markets. So, pharmaceutical companies can respond to demand by adjusting their production and logistics accordingly. Some caveats with the analysis are that due to the data gaps, a short range of 2010 to 2020 year range was explored. Addition of data beyond 2020 would be helpful, especially to understand how the COVID pandemic influenced the global medication spending. Also, only 44 countries are included in this dataset, so there is no representation of the African or South American markets. Thank you for listening to my presentation.